Let's bring you our spotlight guest, Behnam Ben Taleblu, the Iran Program's Senior Director and Senior Fellow, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Behnam Ben Taleblu, thanks for being with us here on France 24. Your time's always appreciated. Given this situation and what we're hearing, what do you see as the outcome? What would be, for instance, Iran's next move here?
Well, it's always good to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me. This is still a game of high risk, high reward for both sides, both in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, as well as in the letter diplomacy, the edited letters or MOUs that may be floated back and forth that has been reported this morning. Certainly, the Islamic Republic is looking to play to the edge here to see how risk averse versus how risk tolerant the Trump administration is in the Middle East after 40 days of war and after several weeks of partial closure of the Strait of Hormuz and after several days of the blockade and even after 1 day of the Trump administration's attempt to reopen it. So you're likely going to see a heck of a lot more from the same. Interesting that both countries right now have trips to China on the books. The Iranian foreign minister there already, as you had just reported, President Trump going there, I think, May 14 and May 15. Both of these trips should be seen in a similar light.
It's interesting that you bring up China so soon in this conversation, because there are many who say that China, in so many scenarios, geopolitically speaking, is almost like the puppet master, sort of controlling everything in some kind of way, with the strings going everywhere across the globe. I wouldn't say that was completely what we're seeing here, but nonetheless, China's voice is one that will be listened to.
Certainly one that will be listened to, but also one that is being sought by these two very different states that have two very different relationships with the Chinese. You know, America isn't reliant on Persian Gulf oil. It's China that is reliant on Persian Gulf oil. But at the same time, China buys more oil from the Arab side, the pro-American side of the Persian Gulf, than from its partner, the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the same time, the Chinese have reportedly helped the Iranians in terms of satellite imagery and targeting data that have made the Iranian strikes against American military facilities in Gulf Cooperation Council countries more effective and more dangerous and more lethal. So China is always playing this balancing act, but it has primarily mercantilist and predatory motives, if you had to ask me. And at the same time, I think the U.S. is looking to find a way to raise the Iran profile in the bilateral relationships between America and China, and the Iranians are looking to decrease the importance of this issue so that the Chinese don't essentially sell the Islamic Republic out to Washington at the right price. But given President Trump's stated preference for a deal and highly public desire to be seen as a deal maker, the Chinese may try to step in and try to broker something. But again, if past is prologue, these are two actors that even those with the best of intentions who want to broker or mediate to have failed to do so in the past.
Indeed, it's much as made of China's usual strategic ambiguity, which basically says that China is looking out for its own interests in terms of how it acts. And you can see either side here that China could really be using some kind of influence for its own end, and perhaps at the end of the day for the resolution of the war. That remains to be seen. But going back to Donald Trump, are we really seeing here that the US president is running out of options?
I don't think the U.S. is running out of options here. In fact, I think with respect to M words, media and markets have really binded the president's options in theory much more than in practice. If you look at the price of oil spiking, it's comparatively less than the spike in the first 6 months of the Ukraine war when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And America is much more susceptible to price shocks than supply shocks because, again, it is not reliant on Persian Gulf oil. But the fear of losing the narrative of war and the costs of oil price spikes during an election year for the president seem to be conditioning him, as well as, of course, the reliance of America's partners and allies, be it in Europe or in East Asia, on Persian Gulf oil. That, too, is impacting things. I think the president has real leverage here with the economic blockade that he has. He can make the regime sweat. The regime will face a gasoline crisis sooner than America will face a major oil price or even supply crisis. But again, we're all seeing in real time how risk averse versus how risk tolerant President Trump is. And if it is proven to be more risk averse, it's risk averse on the back end of a highly risk tolerant thing, which is 40 days of conflict, open shooting in the Middle East.
Some people might say that before February the 28th, such problems in the Strait of Hormuz just did not exist. I know that the real situation wasn't as clear as that. There were still little incidents going on which clearly would not have been the desired thing to be seen from any seafarer's situation. However, on the whole, access to and from the Persian Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz pre-February the 28th was working quite well. Some might say that the situation right now is a direct production of the decision by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu to carry out the attacks on Iran on February the 28th. And now we have a situation where France is sending its aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, to the Red Sea. How do you read that situation with France sending their aircraft carrier?
Well, two things you mentioned. One, the French aircraft carrier, and the second, of course, being the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and Persian Gulf. I have to push back on the Strait of Hormuz situation. The Islamic Republic always had this capability. There are reports after reports after reports of fast attack craft harassment of commercial vessels and U.S. vessels, 2014, 2015, all the way up to Iran using drones to later on harass these vessels. Yes, they never shut down the strait in this way, but we also shouldn't be overreacting. And again, the fear here is media and markets together has created an overreaction that has really amplified the Islamic Republic's ability. What Iran has done is try to create a tiered entry system to get international tankers who do want to enter the Persian Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz to enter via Iranian territorial waters and risk being shot if they don't comply. So, we have to see this as a call to urgency that the Islamic Republic had this capability, has incrementally been using it, and then really deployed it almost kind of like a nuclear weapon during and after the 40-day conflict in the Middle East. So if anything, this should heighten Western resolve to deal with the regime that actually wields this capability rather than give in to it. That's the first thing I would say. And for the U.S., which has a major military, constellation of major military bases and facilities in the region, CENTCOM was literally created on the back end of a conflict, the Iran-Iraq war, which featured the tanker war, which featured Iran threatening freedom of navigation and the free flow of oil through, you guessed it, this very critical waterway. So we should have seen this thing coming miles and miles and miles away. With respect to the French deployments, listen, I want more, not less, European involvement in this region, but at the same time, a French deployment to the Red Sea when the Red Sea has not kicked off as a crisis, while America has been paying much more attention to the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz and the counter-mining mission there. If the French are going to be deploying their limited maritime assets to this area, I would prefer them to be able to deploy it to the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz and assist with counter-mining and mine-sweeping missions, particularly when there's a ceasefire, rather than moving into the Red Sea and simply waiting.
Final question. In the immediate future, do you think we are seeing the end game here, the conclusion of this conflict, or is the fear that this is really going to, in some way, shape or form, become inflamed again?
Well, certainly, even if there is an agreement, in my view, we are nowhere near the end game. If an agreement, particularly along the contours that has been reported earlier today by Axios, which reportedly had insight into those letters and alleged memorandums of understandings that were in draft form that were passed back and forth from Iran to America. That does not at all solve the many, many issues that have separated America and Iran for so many years. And if anything, the 40 days of conflict have aggravated rather than eased those many issues, particularly on the nuclear issue, which has oriented and animated Washington for quite some time towards Tehran. So even if the low probability, high impact chance that there is some quote unquote resolution to the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, we're not going to be seeing a real easing of tensions, in my view, anytime soon.
Thank you very much indeed. Behnam Ben Taleblu, Iran Programme Senior Director and Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Pleasure to have you on France 24, as always. Thank you, sir. We are watching for all developments, of course, both diplomatically and over in the Middle East, as well as all the world news for you. We take a short break. After that, the news continues. Stay with us.